Have you ever watched your phone light up with an incoming call and felt your entire body tense for a split second? Not because it's bad news, not because you're in trouble, just because it's a call. And instead of answering, you stare at it, let it ring, and immediately send a message. Hey, what's up? If that's you, you're not alone. In fact, you might be part of a quiet majority. There are people who can text for hours, send voice notes, react with emojis, craft the perfect response. But the moment the phone starts ringing, it feels intrusive. Too sudden, too demanding. It's easy to label this as laziness, social anxiety, or this generation is just bad at communication. But what if it's something deeper? What if preferring text over calls isn't about avoiding people, but about how your brain has learned to feel safe? Let's start with something simple. A phone call is immediate. It demands your attention right now. You can't pause it. You can't edit yourself. You can't think for 5 minutes before responding. It's live. And for your nervous system, that matters. Texting, on the other hand, is asynchronous. That's just a fancy way of saying it gives you space. You can read, think, type, delete, retype, send, or not send. You can respond in 2 minutes or 2 hours. Texting allows you to regulate yourself before engaging. For some people, that difference is everything. Your brain is constantly scanning for 2 things in social situations: connection and threat. A call compresses both into one tight moment. Tone of voice, pauses, interruptions, the possibility of awkward silence. You don't just have to communicate, you have to perform presence. And that performance, even if subtle, activates the social monitoring parts of your brain. Research on social cognition shows that real-time conversation requires rapid processing of vocal cues, facial in your mind, predicting responses, managing your own tone, and tracking the emotional flow of the interaction. It's like juggling invisible balls while walking a tightrope. For some people, that's energizing. For others, it's exhausting. Texting removes most of those layers. It strips communication down to words and symbols. No immediate tone shifts. No pressure to respond instantly. Your brain gets to slow down. Now here's where it gets interesting. People who prefer texting often aren't antisocial. In fact, many of them are deeply thoughtful communicators. They care about saying the right thing. They replay conversations in their head afterward. They notice small shifts in tone. They analyze what they meant versus what was heard. In other words, they're often high in social awareness, and that awareness can make real-time calls feel high stakes. Imagine you're someone who thinks in paragraphs, who needs a moment to organize your thoughts, who worries about accidentally sounding dismissive or too intense. A phone call forces immediacy. Texting allows precision. There's also the issue of control. Calls are unpredictable. You don't know how long they'll last. You don't know where they'll go. They can stretch from quick question into a 40-minute emotional debrief. For a brain that values structure or autonomy, that unpredictability can feel destabilizing. Texting has boundaries built into it. It's naturally segmented. You can step away. You can end a conversation by simply not replying right away. It gives you control over pacing. And let's talk about energy. Some people gain energy from live interaction. Others lose it. Introversion, despite popular myths, isn't about shyness. It's about stimulation thresholds. Phone calls are high stimulation. They demand immediate cognitive and emotional engagement. Texting is lower stimulation. It lets you engage without fully activating your social battery. But it's not just about personality. It's also about environment. Many people grew up during a transition. They experienced childhood with some phone calls, but adolescence with texting, messaging apps, and online communication. Their brains learned intimacy through typed words. Crushes happened over late-night messages. Friendships deepened in chat windows. Arguments were processed in long texts when your formative emotional experiences happened through text. That medium doesn't feel distant. It feels natural. There's something else at play too. Texting offers a layer of emotional buffering. If someone says something intense, you have time to absorb it before responding. On a call, emotion hits instantly. There's no filter between you and the other person's tone. For people who are sensitive to emotional shifts, that immediacy can feel overwhelming. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called affect regulation, which is just a complicated way of saying how we manage emotions in real time. Texting gives you a built-in pause button for regulation. Calls don't. Now think about modern life. We are constantly interrupted. Notifications, emails, alerts, demands. A phone call cuts through all of it. It's loud in a way that a text isn't. When someone calls, it feels like a spotlight. You must respond now, and your brain might interpret that as pressure rather than connection. There's also the fear of missteps. In a call, you can't delete a sentence. You can't rephrase mid-air. You can't carefully soften a statement before it lands. For people who value emotional nuance, that lack of editing feels risky. Texting is editing-friendly. It aligns with brains that prefer reflection over reaction. But here's the paradox. The same people who avoid calls often crave deep connection. They want meaningful conversations. They want to be understood. They just want it in a format that feels safe and manageable. Calls feel like jumping into deep water. Texting feels like stepping in slowly. Sometimes preferring text over calls is also about vulnerability. A voice carries emotion in ways text doesn't. You can hear disappointment. You can hear hesitation. You can hear tears, even if the person tries to hide them. That level of exposure can feel too intimate, especially for people who learned early in life to manage emotions quietly. If you grew up in an environment where emotions were unpredictable or overwhelming, you might unconsciously prefer communication that allows distance, not because you don't care, but because your nervous system learned that distance equals safety, and safety is powerful. There's also the social shift happening across generations. Older generations often see calls as respectful and texting as dismissive. Younger generations often see calls as intrusive and texting as considerate. Neither is objectively right or wrong. They're calibrated to different norms. When landlines were common, a call was expected. It was structured. It was often the only option. Today, a call feels like breaking a social rhythm. Text first. Schedule. Ask if it's okay. So sometimes preferring text isn't avoidance. It's etiquette, at least in your social world. Let's also acknowledge something quietly honest. Some people prefer texting because it allows them to present a curated version of themselves. You can craft your humor. You can adjust your tone. You can think through your emotions before sharing them. Calls demand spontaneity. And spontaneity reveals you in real time. That vulnerability can be beautiful. It can also be terrifying. But here's where it gets balanced. While texting offers control and regulation, it can also create misunderstandings. Tone is inferred. Pauses feel heavier. A delayed reply can spiral into overthinking. Did I say something wrong? Why haven't they responded? The same space that protects you can also amplify anxiety. Your brain fills in blanks when it lacks cues. Without voice, tone, or facial expression, it relies on assumptions. And assumptions often lean negative when we're unsure. So the preference for texting isn't flawless. It's adaptive. It serves a function. But, like any adaptation, it has trade-offs. There's something almost philosophical about this shift. Technology didn't just change how we communicate. It changed how we experience presence. A call requires shared time. Texting allows parallel lives. You can be connected without being fully immersed. That appeals to brains that value autonomy, that struggle with overstimulation, that need time to process. But sometimes growth happens in discomfort. Sometimes answering the call event when it feels inconvenient reminds you that your voice carries warmth that text can't replicate. That laughter sounds different than ha-ha. That silence shared in real time can feel grounding rather than awkward. It's not about forcing yourself to love calls. It's about understanding what your preference reveals. Do you need time to think before speaking? That's thoughtfulness. Do you feel drained by live interaction? That's an energy pattern, not a flaw. Do you worry about saying the wrong thing? That's sensitivity. The key is awareness. When you understand why you lean toward texting, you can choose consciously rather than react automatically. Maybe you text because you value clarity. Maybe because you're protecting your energy. Maybe because unpredictability unsettles you. Maybe because vulnerability feels easier when buffered by a screen. None of that makes you cold, or antisocial, or incapable. It means your brain adapted to a world where communication is constant and overwhelming, and it found a way to stay connected without burning out at the same time. It's worth asking yourself gently, is this preference serving me or limiting me? Are there conversations that deserve your voice? Are there relationships that deepen when tone and timing aren't filtered? You don't have to swing to extremes. You don't have to answer every call, but you might experiment. Notice what happens when you lean into slight discomfort. Notice what happens when you explain your preference honestly instead of silently avoiding. Connection isn't about the medium, it's about intention. Texting can be deeply intimate. A well-crafted message at midnight can feel like a lifeline. A thoughtful paragraph can feel more meaningful than a rushed call. And a call, when chosen consciously, can carry warmth that text can't fully capture. So if you're someone who instinctively reaches for the keyboard instead of the green button, you're not broken. You're not socially deficient. You're navigating modern connection in a way that feels manageable for your nervous system. The real psychology isn't about whether texting is better than calling. It's about how your brain balances safety, control, energy, and intimacy. And once you see that, the choice becomes less about fear and more about awareness. Maybe next time the phone rings, instead of feeling guilt or irritation, you'll feel curiosity. What exactly is my brain protecting me from right now? And is that protection still necessary? That small question alone can shift everything. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear how you experience calls versus texts. Do you feel energized by one and drained by the other? Or maybe you've changed over time. Let me know your story. And if you enjoy exploring the quiet psychology behind everyday habits like this, stick around. There's always more beneath the surface than we think.